All right, and we are live. Jen, thank you so much for stopping by today. I'm looking forward to this chat. It has been a long time since we really had a chance to talk from our days working at Blue Ant Media. So I'm really excited to get caught up with you today.
Yes, yes, I'm excited to be here. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thanks for the time. So let's start with where you are right now. So you're the director of sales at NABS Media. I think it's really important that we get it out there and we let the audience know. I'm sure some people are familiar with NABS, what NABS Media is, or just what NABS is in general, and what your role there is and how it supports those two other groups that I mentioned.
Okay. Yeah, so I am the director of the media sale for NABS, and NABS is our industry charity, basically. It stands for the National Advertising Benevolent Society. I believe it was kind of mirrored way back in the day after something that started in the UK, but it has been around since 1983. So throughout my entire career, I've known about it and gone to events that they've had in the past or things of that nature. When I was at Blue Ant, I actually organized the donations for NABS, so always knew about it. There's been two directors of the media sale before me, and the last one was Brian Press, and I knew him and I'd see him at events. And it's a very unique position in that um, all of the vendors, so all of the media companies, uh, donate airtime to NABS, the media sale, and it we raise money for NABS by me. I sell that, and all of the proceeds, 100% go to NABS and support all the programming that they do to support our community. So everybody in the ad industry, media companies, creative agencies, PR firms, all of that is supported by NABS.
We're
So it's
gonna
great.
we're gonna come back to that later on, but let's go back
Okay.
to the beginning. I had no idea that you were a border town girl. So you were born in Windsor.
I was born in Windsor because my parents fell in love in university. So
They were
I,
Lancers.
well, actually, no, my mom did nursing at University of Toronto and met my dad at a bar, as you do, on a weekend off. And my dad was doing his master's. So my mom started working in medical records in Windsor because I was around already. and and my dad was finishing his master's, so that's why we lived in Windsor at the beginning.
The beginning,
Yeah.
and then you moved to Kleinburg after. So most of your life was actually your early life was spent in Kleinburg.
Yes. So my parents divorced when I was pretty young, when I was about 4, and it was a modern day, very amicable divorce. They should have been friends, not husband and wife. And my dad has always been in Niagara, and then my mom and I moved to Toronto, and eventually she remarried and we moved to Kleinburg. So from the time I was 8 until university, I was in Kleinburg.
What was
So
what was Kleinburg like when you were growing up? Because right now it's one of those hotbeds where there's a lot of subdivisions popping up, but we know that when before subdivisions, it's usually a lot of farmland. Is that what you experienced?
well, and it was kind of weird because I did live on a farm. It was my stepdad he was a millwright. He had a machinery business. So we were just weekend farmers, if you will. So I grew up with horses and all of that. But most of my friends lived in the actual subdivision. So it
Mm.
was kind of, they were always like, oh, can I come over and go riding? And as a kid, you thought it was such a pain. All your suburban friends wanted to come and hang out, and you'd have to go catch the horse, and they didn't really know what they were doing. And so it was kind of a weird hybrid because there were some farmers. And then when I went to high school, I actually went to King City. So sat on a bus for an hour. And then you have the posh farms up there. So it was an interesting kind of hybrid of suburban and like fancy farmers in that area.
So your friends had that McMansion double car garage in the ensuite, and you had a stable with horses.
Yeah, yeah. Like my best friend in high school, actually, she was lived on a huge horse farm. All her family was on the board of the Royal Winter Fair. Her street was named after her. And yeah, I went,
Okay, the
I went
street was
down.
named after her.
Oh yeah, like she was a huge equestrian, and yet I kind of dabbled and did weekend shows in the Kleinburg and Woodbridge area. So yeah, it was different.
You said something interesting that your parents were weekend farmers or recreational farmers. Like, what does that entail? Because it's pretty expensive keeping a farm together.
Mhm.
And usually it's a full-time job for most people.
Yeah, well, I guess my stepdad was pretty smart in that Kleinburg, as you know, is probably about, well, not in today's traffic, but back then about a half an hour from like North Etobicoke, say. So there's a lot of people who like to ride and board horses and that sort of thing. So we actually had a couple that kind of worked for us, if you will, that worked in a factory in Rexdale. And then in exchange to board their 4 horses, they would clean the barn, feed the horses, the whole 9 yards. So, yeah, they did all that on our farm, and, my stepdad liked driving the tractor and my brother did on the weekends, but we definitely had help. It was kind of an interesting arrangement.
Was there any apprehension to riding horses or taking it up when you were young, or was that something that you just jumped on?
No, I loved it. It was a lot of fun. Like, when my mom met my stepdad, he was into riding, and I I did Western, and then I changed over and learned, equestrian and some dressage, and dabbled a little bit in showing, but and it was certainly nice to have. And then, you go up to university and everything gets kind of, evolved, and you sell everything eventually, and so it's weird because it's not part of my life anymore, but it was a great way to grow up.
What's the difference between you said Western and equestrian? Because I thought equestrian was just kind of like the generic term for riding and breeding horses, but it sounds like
Uh,
it's more specific than that.
well, it's English. It's English, like, so when you see people jumping, and showing in the Olympics with, like, the top hat looking thing, and uh, it's that's the style of, English equestrian riding, and dressage is kind of a different kind of showing that I did, and it's usually on thoroughbred horses. And we had quarter horses as well that we would race, and they're more like the Yellowstone horses, the cowboy hats, that sort of thing. And I did actually a bit of barrel racing when I was a kid, so then that's part of the Western part. And I brought my boys to a fair once in Ohio and showed it to them, and they could care less. The big part of my heritage that their mom used to do that, and they're like, "Yeah, whatever." But that's the difference.
Why do you credit both your parents and Oprah as some of your influences growing up? So let's start first with your parents before we get to Oprah.
Okay. My parents, again, they worked really hard, to raise me well. I'm technically an only child, even though I call myself a family studies textbook, because I'm an only. I'm the oldest. Because I have step siblings, half siblings, the whole 9 yards. But they were very different, but they were very supportive of each other and me my whole life, despite the fact that they weren't married anymore. And when I think about kind of blossoming into who I am now and growing my career, my mom, she had a very infectious, magnetic personality. Anybody who knew her loved her, and she had a great work ethic. And on the other hand, my dad was is super intelligent. My mom has passed away. My dad is very much here. My dad was the executive director of Children's Aid, so he did a lot of things for the cause, not the applause. He was a great public speaker, did a lot with Kids Help Phone. So it was pretty admirable on both sides. So if I could take a piece of each of them and kind of bloom that, I would be proud. And the reason I said Oprah is because she has made a huge success out of being vulnerable. Um, Something that's always kind of got me in maybe in trouble over the years, but now as I get older, I like to think of my vulnerability as my superpower. And I think that she was on the forefront of that, and there's been people after that, like Ellen and all those people, and I think it's important to be authentic, and I think that's a big part of it. So that's why I mentioned her too.
Go back to your dad for a second. You mentioned he worked for Children's Aid, and
Hmm.
that is a heavy job, regardless of what you're doing in that organization. I imagine he probably did a good job of not bringing his work home. Do you think that's because he was just very good at separating work from family, or because he had a certain level of resilience that allowed him to do that?
I think it was a bit of both. I never lived with him growing up. I was the weekend kid, but I have a half brother who did, and his answer would probably be completely different. Because yeah, it does wear on you. And my stepmother was a social worker, but had to be removed. And when my dad became the grand poobah of that area and had to kind of go to the other side. But I think he was quite resilient, absolutely, but I don't think you something like that you can completely not bring home. I just didn't see it as much as my brother would have. So,
I ask all my guests what their first job was, and this is gonna be episode 122. You are the first one to say that your first job ever was picking onions at the farm down the street.
yeah. Yeah, so, well, I know we've known each other a little while, and I'm sure, I've told you this a million times, but, I was gifted, so I was young and I skipped a grade, and so when my friends all started working, I was obsessed with having my own money as well, and I lived in Vaughan, so Canada's Wonderland was a big deal,
Mhm.
and I technically, legally wasn't old enough. I remember getting my mom to drive me there, and I tried to convince them, but based on plus I was on student council, I was in this grade, but legally they still couldn't hire me. So at like 12 and 13, I had to drive my bike down the street and I picked onions at a farm so I could get a paycheck because I wasn't old enough to work at Canada's Wonderland yet, which I eventually pivoted to and had a very fruitful career right until university. I worked at Canada's Wonderland after that.
So wait, what were you doing at Canada's Wonderland? Because there's like 100 different jobs you could be doing there. Were you operating a coaster, running the games, working
Well,
retail?
I worked in the attractions department, so I started in grounds, and then I moved to by the time I was in university, I worked in the head office, so I was, because I like to hear myself talk, I guess, I was on the walkie-talkie, calling out if a roller coaster broke down or, there was a protein spill, which, you can imagine what that meant on one of the
God.
rides, and,
Wait,
no,
you
it was
guys called
great.
it a protein spill? You ca
I called it a protein spill. We had codes for everything, and I was like the base unit for communications. And sometimes I get creative and I get called out for it. Like if I remember Scooby Choo broke, and I would say there's a locomotion problem, Scooby
God.
Choo, and then the supervisors didn't like that. They didn't let that fly. But it was fun. It's a great. There's not a lot of places you can work where you're 18 years old and you have a crew of 12 people reporting to you out in the grounds. It's and they really kind of it's a great fun environment too. It was really great back in the day.
Would you say that was your first real bit of professional leadership experience? You mentioned you had done student council, and I don't want to downplay that because I did that as well too, but this seems like it was really the first time you were paid to lead.
Yeah, and ironically, in my career, I kind of pivoted out of that. I became more interested in, just the selling part instead of the leading part. But I, yeah, I guess that would have been it. And but back to the Kleinberg part, I also did work um, in between, like ramping up to different jobs at Canada's. Like in the off season, I worked at the McMichael Collection because you have to do that when you when you live in Kleinberg. So I did work for the group of seven. Yeah.
Is that the gallery that's just off of Islington?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a great government job. Pierre Burton lived in town still when I was growing up. And yeah, I worked in the gallery too. So that was very apropos for the neighborhood.
Why did you attend Carleton, and why did you choose to study film studies?
I got into Carleton in journalism, which I was excited about. And then I got nervous and stayed home and went to York and basically became a full time waitress. My mom worked at York, so my tuition was free. But then my parents, again, the weird divorcees that come together, they said, you need to experience life differently and move out. So then the next year I went to Carleton for journalism. And it was hard. It was too many hours. It was, going to cover stories on Parliament Hill Friday morning at 8 a.m. after pub. So I ended up, the film study was in the same building, and I ended up kind of pivoting to that. I was always interested in film. I signed up and did an extra kind of, to do any kind of production, you had to do it as a workshop because it wasn't, film at that level was kind of more theoretical. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much.
How did living in Ottawa compare to Kleinburg, Toronto, and even Windsor?
Oh, so cold. I remember being
Every time I ask someone that, that's exactly where they go, is they go first to the weather.
well, cold and sleepy. You could ride your bike down the middle of Bank Street at, 9 p.m. on a Friday night and there's nobody there. And I remember driving all the way to Pickering to get this cool Club Monaco jacket I wanted to bring to university. And I froze. Like by a month in, I was calling my parents saying, "Can I have an early birthday present? Can you send me a big ski jacket?" I was freezing. But yeah, no, it was fun. It was there was a lot of people from my high school that went there too, but I did manage to, meet some new friends when I was there.
So after Carleton, you got your first job at BBDO in their traffic department. How did you go
Mhm.
from studying film, coming back to Toronto, and finding that role at BBDO? Because I have to imagine, and I took a couple of film classes as well, so I knew the film program, or at least the film students, pretty well at my alma mater. But I got to tell you, not once did anyone ever teach us what ad trafficking was. So
Yeah.
how did you stumble upon that? Because that, even though it's kind of within the realm of what you were doing to a certain degree, a bit of a stretch, it's still not something that's taught.
I think I decided I wanted to work in advertising and I wanted to be a commercial producer. So, my dad, I introduced me to a family friend who was Peter Byrne from Ben Simon Byrne. He was like the guy wrote Harvey's Makes a Hamburger a Beautiful Thing, and like the guy was brilliant. And he was a music teacher and then became a copywriter. So I always thought he was really smart. And I sat with him and decided to work at an agency and traffic was kind of production at every agency except for BBDO. It was part of media. So
Mm.
I kind of backwardly ended up in media. Um, I met the assistant producer who I became really good friends with, and we took a production course at ICA. And so I did learn those skills. But while I was working at BBDO, again, because I was part of the only traffic department that at the time was part of media. I think most of them are now. Um, I uh, I was exposed to media sales reps and thought they were the most glamorous, exciting people in the world, and thus the another pivot in what I wanted to do.
So you got the media sales bug there, and
Yeah,
is it at this point where you're kind of reflecting on what kind of skills or experience do I need to kinda go down that direction? Because your next move, was it to CBC as an assistant in their traffic department?
yeah. So, agencies at the time didn't pay you very much, worked you round the clock. And I did get my first glimpse at what a glamorous media salesperson could be like. But at the same time, I was young, it was the very beginning, and I thought, the CBC, look at it's a government job. They're paying me like $10,000 more a year. And I don't really know what this job is, but I'm going to apply to it and see what happens. And actually, it was an assistant. It wasn't even traffic at first. But I thought if I hate it, I'll just, go traveling for a year. So I ended up getting into it, and I had about six different jobs in my 6 years at the CBC, kind of moving around from traffic to sales. I ended up in marketing, which kind of was like the revenue management area. Met a lot of great contacts, but as you know, because I know you spent some time there as well in your career, it was a different setup then. It was unionized. A lot of people weren't moving very quickly. You kind of looked for an opportunity to backfill jobs, maybe with a mat leave or something, and it just wasn't going to happen.
Mm.
So I said, you know what, enough is enough. I got married very young, so I was already married, but I wasn't close to having kids. And I just said, I want to sell, I want to try it. And I shocked everybody and quit the corp and sold retail radio for 97.7 Hits FM.
Oh, that is a big jump. Before we jumped
Yeah.
in to 97.7, your time there, you mentioned that you had a number of different jobs pop up, or you did a number of different roles at CBC.
Mhm.
Were you So when I started at CBC, and I'd say for most of my tenure there, I didn't have a full-time contract. Like I had a temp contract that kept getting renewed, but I did have peers that were also on temporary contracts. And as it would come to the close, they'd be looking at what else was available within the department. Did you find that's what you were doing, or did you just have opportunities to move around? Like, was it that easy back then to go from, let's say, like you said, from traffic to marketing to media sales or so forth?
The opportunities weren't easy, but I was already full-time. Like, I was
Mm, okay.
full-time. I understand that, there was a lot of temps happening, but I guess I was lucky in that the job that I landed was full-time, and then I just tried to backfill, based on temporary upgrades that were happening. And I made it very clear that I wanted to get into sales. There wasn't a lot of movement there. I would pitch jobs. I when movie business was starting to come up and they decided to make a unit, I was like, we need an inside sales rep for this. And I would make information meetings with leaders and try, and then you had to sit for boards and I did all of that. And then I guess eventually got impatient and said, no, I'm ready to sell now. So
Were they surprised when you gave your resignation and you told them that you were going to sell retail radio? Because
yeah.
I understand how dramatic of a change it is going from the CBC to retail radio. I don't think our audience fully understands that. Can you give us just like a taste of what that looks like, what you're going from and where you're going to?
Oh yeah, I was going to a B market from Toronto, first of all, and I was leaving a union job with a pension, and I was doing something that could have, like, basically could have come with no list and was like complete, you eat what you kill. So it was really kind of dusting things off and seeing if I felt I had the chops to do it and I was ready to give it a try. But yeah, it would be nostalgic for some of the older sales reps, would be remembering how that's how they started in something similar. But it was kind of shock in a respectful way. It was nice.
So you get the job. What was day one like for you there?
In St. Catharines,
Or at HTZ? Yeah, yeah, at HTZ FM.
I call it my WKRP experience for sure. It was in a haunted house, first of all, the old building that it's in.
I'm
I
slightly
was
familiar with it from my time living in St. Catharines. Was this this was still standard radio, right?
uh it wasn't standard, but it wasn't Bell yet. It was the in-between company.
Okay.
Um and it they it was a haunted house in St. Catharines. Again, my dad lived down the street, so geographically I was a little aware of it. I negotiated very quickly that I didn't have to go to the office every day, because it was a backwards commute, but it was about 45 minutes from where I lived at the time. And I did have a list, but it was a lot of new business. But where I found my niche pretty quickly is I sold it regionally. So I ended up getting clients and promotional programs. Like I did a back to school series where I got Hilroy to sponsor it, IKEA. So I was, selling media to head office IKEA in Burlington. I wasn't going to Joe's Dry Cleaners on
Mm.
Niagara Street. So I kind of made a name for myself then and landed some pretty big clients. And within a year, they said, we want you to be national. So IMS hired me in Toronto.
So IMS hires you in Toronto, you become a
hmm
national rep. How do your responsibilities change? Are you back into the major industry world, not industry, major agency world?
Yes, I was responsible for Toronto stations, so there was still a lot of the new business part. And I sold the telemedia and standard radio stations for them. So I didn't sell Hits FM anymore. Ironically, it was like the Fan, Easy Rock, 99.9, that sort of thing. And so yeah, I was servicing the main national ad agencies again, but I had to be a little more strategic and promotional because I didn't have 30 stations like the national reps did. I had six. But it was great. It was a great place to learn. I worked with the retail reps. We're all in the same building, so we kind of had an interesting kind of camaraderie with them, and worked really well. When I was off on maternity leave, they promoted me to new business manager, so I came back to a different role, and it was great. It was a great company.
But also when you came back from maternity leave, is this where the opportunity to join Chorus and Teletoon presented itself?
Yeah. I decided I wanted to try TV. So, yeah, somebody had reached out. Actually, somebody that I worked with at the CBC, one of the sales reps there, had gone to Chorus and she was moving away. So she said, my job's available. And so I started talking to Chorus and joined the Teletoon team.
Was that a pretty big change for you? We know that radio is not the same as television, but we should also highlight that it's not broadcast network television. You were at specialty television. So that
Mhm.
that probably changed the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure it did. And we had French because Teletoon also
Yep.
sold French. So that was something different. Again, you know, love this industry because you end up kind of meeting some of the people. Somebody I worked with at BBDO was there. She was in charge of the French Teletoon part, and it was a great team being part of Chorus, and we were kind of half Estrell, half Chorus because
Hmm.
Teletoon was owned by half, and so I got to work with the Family Channel and Estrell promotional team. We were also kind of unique because we were animated and we had strong CRTC laws around the animation, which made it difficult for programming. So I developed a new respect for them. But it was great. It was a great team.
It's also a premium specialty network, especially back then. So you've got that. I don't want to say that guaranteed position on the dial, but that really helps with the audience and the reach as well too.
Yeah, we didn't have the YTV position, but we did okay. And we back then had Family Guy, which was huge for us. That was kind of the launch of what is now like Adult Swim. So we'd get a lot of sales in that block and then a lot of complaints from viewers in that block because they'd time shift it and their kids would watch it and they'd be upset about it, but they just needed to parent better.
God, that's what it is. I don't think you can respond by that by saying it that way, but yeah,
Well, they didn't put me in charge of answering those calls.
yeah. I worked at Estrell. You were bringing them up, and I had a chance to sell the radio station websites and the French website for Teletoon, and the radio station websites like the Bear out west used to do these really interesting contests where basically they would encourage women to send in photos of them not naked but wearing less to win something. And every once in a while, you'd have a client who'd be like, "My ad's next to what?" And we didn't even know it was happening. Like they were pointing out to us that it was just on this lost page that maybe got actually probably did better than the homepage, I'd say, if they were promoting it broadcast, but not to digress. So how did your sales style change from doing national radio to going to specialty television? Like, what kind of adjustments did you have to make to find success in that new role?
Um, it's it's still like it's servicing agencies. It's getting out there, getting face to face, all the things that I really enjoy. I would say that the Toronto radio job was a lot more promotional than kind of the straight specialty media sales that I was doing at Chorus. But it was really, we would be assigned our lists by agency, and it was just kind of getting in front of and creating great bonds and relationships with the key players at the agencies, which is kind of what national sales becomes about. And, just making sure that you make their job easier for them. They like you, they trust you, you know your product inside and out. I've always been really passionate about what I sold. I liked our products. So it makes it a lot easier.
Did you have to reboot your network a little bit? Because a lot of the clients you were working with in national radio, I have to imagine wouldn't necessarily be interested or transition too nicely into TV, let alone Teletoon.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I definitely had different agencies I called on. So yeah, it's different personnel. It's going to be some of the same players, but it's going to be a lot of different agencies, and it's mostly clients like a client like I worked on McDonald's at Teletoon, and we had a 52-week Happy Meal deal. That's a tough negotiation. So you're dealing with like key people at the agency at the time that are really going to kind of beat you up because it's a 52-week offering. And so it was a great way to learn a different level of my sales skills for sure.
Did your career change when you made the move to Bell Media and you were a TV account executive there? And were you calling on all of Bell's stations or were you focused on CTV?
Okay, so then I pivoted from national sales specialty to local. So I went back to local at
Okay.
CTV, which I was pretty excited about. Like CTV, Bell Media is amazing in that they have such scale. They have a lot of programs with huge ratings, which is very exciting. But because there's so many products, my idea was if you were a national rep, you'd be streamlined. Not only would you only call on one agency, you would call on one account just because they had so
Yeah,
much
that's true.
volume. So going over there and getting to work with their stellar news and all those kind of properties was great. and I loved the fact that I was on the local team. So I was on the Toronto team. So I focused on CTV Toronto, A Channel, which is CTV2 now, and CB24. And CB24 had just kind of launched, and that was the most amazing kind of hybrid you could find between where you're, like you were touching on before, my radio clients that are going to be different than TV. That's kind of like the epitome of radio with visuals, because CB24 can be a station for anybody. It works really well on a national level. It works really well on the local level. So, and I worked a lot with news, and I had a lot of promotionally focused clients like Mirvish, Ontario Place, that sort of thing. So it was an awesome experience.
You make another pivot though. You land at Blue Ant Media after leaving Bell Media. So what brought you there? Because Blue Ant Media, is it safe to say that you were really taking a chance with your career at this point? Because this was something new that you were jumping into, or this was can we say it was a brand spanking new company at this point?
Yeah, they had just switched from Glassbox to Blue Ant. Um, I had talked to them for a long time. So a friend of mine that I worked with on my CTV Toronto team he wanted to pursue management. He had different aspirations than I did, and he went over to Blue Ant early to kind of get some more national experience, and it made sense on that level. I was still, really kind of pumping out some great programs and great clients at CTV Toronto, and but I had started talking to Anna Carbone over at Blue Ant about what they were doing there, and yeah, it was net new. So back in the agencies, which I had missed, it's nice to call on direct clients, but um, there was a couple draws there. Michael McMillan doesn't do anything silly. He's a smart businessman,
Very
and
much as, yeah. Look, so
you
give
know,
us a quick brief on Michael McMillan, one of the co-founders of Alliance Atlantis, and his name's in credits for a number of different programs without people even realizing it.
yeah. So because of his Alliance Atlantis, obviously I knew of him. I never worked at Can West, was one of the places I hadn't worked at, but his reputation is stellar. And I thought, well, if he's at the helm and Raja was also at the helm, they're not going to do anything dumb. And it's an opportunity to kind of really grow from the ground up, because there's nothing really structured or written yet. So it was it was kind of exciting. You had a bigger agency list. You were back in the agencies. There was a need to do a lot of things direct with clients. They had a digital arm that Blue Ant. Well, and you were there as well. As we were kind of expanding, it seemed like it was, go get us the meetings and we'll figure it out later. So, has
Yes.
as somebody
That
as
came up
somebody
quite a bit.
who really enjoys kind of selling and kind of growing all the time, it was great to have that kind of unstructured structured, and to kind of be part of the plan. So I was there for 10 years, and during the time, there was a lot of different things we took on. We got into gaming for a while, as you know. Then there was trade shows. Then we expanded our TV stations. I was part of the TV group, broadcast group, and we kind of kept the lights on for a really long time. But another arm that I really enjoyed working on was the content arm with the Blue Ant Plus stuff, because that was kind of the best of both worlds. And you could do something innovative, creative, and you could execute it across our own networks, and just kind of do straight media buys with that kind of arm as well. So it was good.
What attracted you to the content sales portion? And I wanted to preface that by saying that I know a lot of people that have to do both in the industry, and sometimes they can get very frustrated with the length of time it takes to get a content program off the ground versus those transactional, more traditional media contracts where you can bang out a handful of them in a couple of weeks or even a couple of days for the most part, because there's a lot more instantaneous revenue that you can realize there. So I guess my question is that what attracted you to that portion of it? Just because, again, you were doing so well on the transactional side. Was it something that kind of got over? And I don't want to say that kind of like transactional side of the business creates a bit of boredom, because it can be a bit monotonous at sometimes, because you can be repeating the same talking points, sending the same collateral out. But do you think that this was the one that really gave you that sort of like intellectual stimulation that you were looking for?
For sure. It's nice to have a balance of both, because the transactional stuff is instant gratification, because you see the numbers pop
Yes.
up on your on your spreadsheets and your pipeline. But when and you're right, like, it's a lot of hand holding, it's a lot of heavy lifting when you do content. I was very proud because, the Blue Ant Plus arm, we did really good, fun, creative work. Because we were small and lean, you, as a salesperson, could be very involved in it, which I liked seeing kind of the full picture come to fruition. And, it when those kind of things hit, it just feels different. It's kind of like, you know, uh, as working, calling on a client direct and having it land rather than going through an agency. Things just kind of feel because of the amount of work you had to put into it, it just lands and it feels different for your success.
What I liked about selling content was it felt like you were a bit of a creative artist or an ad artist because you could point to something and say, I had a hand in that. And when it came to like transactional buys, you can't really just hold up a contract and show people and go, I'm responsible for it. Even though you are, it's just not as exciting as playing, say, for example, if it's a custom video. Like one thing that comes to mind, I had no hand in this whatsoever, but it was when I was at Blue Ant Media, we used to show off. Remember the Ford Escape one? Where it was like the the date. I'm like, that was a beautiful execution. And but that's something that you can take someone through and have like the average person understand it. Where if you show them a buy sheet with like, look at my cost per point on here, prime fringe split, they're not going to know what that is.
No, it's true. It's true. And it was fun. Like I loved going to brainstorms. We sat on a few together, I'm sure, in our day.
Yes, we
And
did. Sometimes they were more storm than brain, but they were great.
And I'd be so excited. I'm like, "Oh, that's something I said. Oh, look at that." It's like, I don't know, it's a different kind of ego stroke altogether to kind of feel like you can play with the creative types.
You were promoted to their head of agency development. So what did that entail?
It was kind of a new food, I guess, if you will. It's always kind of interesting that, Blue Ant treated me very well, and I did a lot of good things there, I feel. And it seems like when you're in sales, the to get promoted or recognized for your accomplishments, you become a sales manager or a team lead or something of that nature. That becomes more administrative. It wasn't my strong suit. It wasn't something I was interested in. Not that I wasn't interested in becoming, recognized for my accomplishments. So my VP at the time, Google had kind of launched kind of a position similar, and so it was kind of echoing that in that I could be recognized for what I'd done and how instrumental I was on the team. But it wasn't all about direct reports. It wasn't taking me off of selling for the company anymore. So it just kind of evolved, and I worked with my VP and my EVP on some agency deals or different selling systems and that sort of thing. It was kind of a work in progress, but a lot of it involved kind of, as the agency groups became bigger and bigger, just kind of being more relevant as a partner for them.
Is it safe to say this was like a player coach role? Because on one instance, you're still selling and you're still accountable to a number, but you're leading in another aspect that might impact the greater good of the sales team. Like, because I imagine you were probably also negotiating deals for agencies that sat with other reps. Is that correct?
In theory, yes, but not really, because it was early days, and we're a small team, so people get pretty possessive about what they have. So I would end up negotiating it and executing it. But I did negotiate the biggest agency deal we had ever. And it was bigger, even like the Horizon deal that I did at the time was even bigger than Group M. So I was pretty excited about that.
But when you got that signed, did you take the rest of the week off?
No.
You after, like you said, 10 years of Blue Ant Media, you moved on to Pelmerex. And
Mhm.
if anyone listening to this or watching it is unfamiliar with the name Pelmerex, you'd probably be more familiar with the Weather Network. And
Yes.
so you move over to Pelmerex. Content is structured a little bit different there. Did you find that you were drawing on some of your radio days and even your CP24 days when working at Pelmerex? Like that kind of experience really, really helped you in that job?
Yes, because there's definitely a big play there for direct clients. What I loved about Pomerex was, you talk the talk a lot and walk the walk that you're going to be a digital rep, and you kind of aren't. You get pulled back into broadcast, like a Blue Ant, for example, because that's what is keeping the lights on. And so it was my opportunity. I became programmatic certified. Palmerex is a huge leader in their direct digital, but more importantly, their data, their ability to target. And so it was a huge, huge learning curve and learning opportunity for me to be part of that team. And it is structured with their support like I've never seen before. The amount of, ad ops that supports you, the sales coordinators that support you with both the broadcast and the digital was incredible. And all the client partner network, because we were 100% remote. So it's a different way to get to know a team, but
Mm.
it's still very much a team. And everybody, it's so diverse. Everybody has their own specialty and they're applauded for being different than the next client partner. So it was a very cool experience. I really enjoyed my time there.
Would you say that in your role at Pelmerex, digital played, I guess, a bigger role in what you sold than, say, at previous companies?
Oh, yeah. I was like, I've sold a little bit of broadcast because it was my comfort zone, and if I was trying to get closer to my monthly budget, I could, call out a favor.
Yeah.
But but, um but no, I was, primarily a digital rep, and we had some really cool, like, to your point, content plays. There was a lot of weather triggering, interesting things. I worked on Shiseido, and we did some really cool stuff about UV index and UV triggering, and it was really innovative and a really cool place. Like those brainstorms were beyond because there was so many people with so many different backgrounds involved. It was really neat.
Okay, so let's bring things full circle. The opportunity to join NABS. How did it present itself?
The friend that I mentioned a long time ago at the beginning of this that I met at BBDO back in the day, she when we took that production course, she now owns Apex PR. She went on that side of the business, and they are a supporter of NABS. And she just kind of sent me while I was at Palmerex the notification that the head of the media sale was retiring, and she said, "We do a lot of work with NABS. Would you be interested in this? This seems like it's right up your alley." Um, I I've really loved my whole career in this industry, and I love, like, one of the things that I benefited from at Blue Ant being small is that my agency list was huge.
Mm.
And like I mentioned before, when you're at somewhere like Bell Media, where you have so many products, and Palmerex, even where you have a lot of products, it gets smaller and smaller. So I miss talking to everyone. And this just seemed like it was right up my alley. You do it for the cause, not the applause. I
That's a
feel
great
like in
line.
that
Yes.
I learned that from my son's firefighting school, but I do like it.
Nice.
But, I just feel at this part of my career, it's important, and the work they do is incredibly important, and selfishly, it gives me everything that I want. I get to deal with all the vendors, where I always say we're a very incestuous industry where people show up somewhere again and again and again. You're gonna run into the same people within your network, and that's an awesome thing about our community and our industry. But now I am in a position where it's my job to call on absolutely every person at the vendor level and every person at the ad agency and client level. So, and the more I build the program and the more I sell, the more I'm helping other people. So how can that be a bad thing?
Your network must be way more expansive than it's ever been because of this.
Well, it's getting there, and I love that, what we would call, C-suite people, um, as we've been coming up in the business, I just reach out. I don't even have to write a little ditty, and because I'm who I am with NABS, people, understand it's important, and they connect with me. And but everybody's running around with their hair on fire. At NABS, we like to say that we're everybody's favorite afterthought because eventually they'll get to us. But it's just the industry is running so lean that there's no question where it's important to everybody, and we know that. And so I just have to develop my cadence to be top of mind in a non-obnoxious way.
And if someone listening to this is learning about NABS for the first time in a little bit more in depth, or maybe they're finding out about NABS altogether, just give us a taste as to what the different services are that they provide to the ad industry. Because I'll be honest with you, when I first heard about NABS, and I say this with any shame, I thought it was strange that the ad industry had a charity supporting it. Because when you think of charity, you kind of think of like a terminal disease or an injury that, like say, like a spinal cord injury, like something that needs additional research and funding to fix or so forth, you don't think about the ad industry really needing assistance. But I discovered NABS just before the bottom fell out in 2008 with the world, and I really got a chance to see what kind of services they provide and all of the good they do in the industry. So, give us just a couple of examples of the things that people in the ad industry can not just participate in, but they can utilize from NABS.
Yeah, okay. They we have evolved over the years for sure. It used to be back in the day kind of an extension of, companies' HR services, and they would kind of rely on you for that. Whereas now, we've done a lot more customization. It is important to support our community. So we have a whole bunch of, we have a whole, we've taken everything internally. So we have a director of wellness that personalizes anything. When you reach out to somebody, like we deal with addiction, we deal with chronic illness for yourself, or maybe your job is interrupted because you're dealing with an ailing parent or child or that sort of thing. Everything is handled on a case by case basis, and we're there to filter and provide instant support in the wellness area. We also handle a lot of short term financial aid. So, again, it could be from illness, it could be from layoffs, restructuring, that sort of thing. People reach out. We have a double blind allocation committee that is there to uh, work with a financial advisor, help out the individual, and get them with the help they need to kind of pivot to the next thing. The need has been, I started in November, and the need for people reaching out, especially for financial aid, is 5 times greater than it has been in the past. So
Wow. Okay.
that just kind of shows where we're at in the industry. And it's unfortunate, like, as somebody who's worked in this industry her whole career, you see layoffs, you see restructuring, you see account movement, all it becomes very vulnerable in our industry, and it makes you sad, but at the same time it reinstates why it's so important that I'm doing what I do. And NABS has also kind of taken on, we to maximize our efforts as far as fundraising and money goes, we attach ourselves to people like ad clubs. So back in the day we used to have our own events, like our own parties, our own golf tournaments, that sort of thing, and now we attach to like CABR, ad club, that sort of thing, and we can maximize the donations that way. But we also are doing a lot of career pivoting and redeployment. We do a lot of advice in that area. So we're really customizing where the industry needs us to be right now, which I'm pretty excited about.
Jen, if anyone watching or listening to this wants to learn more about NABS, what's the best way they can do it?
Just go onto our website at nabs.org and make sure when you're there to sign up for the newsletter, and noodle around to look up the events as well. And you can also reach out to me if you want any information on the media sale at jhawtin at nabs.org.
Okay. And if you're watching this, we're definitely going to put it up on the video, both the website and your email.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Okay. You ready for rapid fire questions?
Okay, I think so.
The campaign you're most proud of, and before you say it, I'm not surprised. You worked very hard on this one. I sat a couple of desks down from you while you were working on this bad boy.
Well, this one is kind of selfish because, yeah, it was a big one, and it was invented by me. And again, it was an opportunity. It was working on something for PwC when they launched their digital digital fitness app, and it was because we worked at Blue Ant, who said, "Bring us an opportunity, and we'll make it work." And that just shows the flexibility of the company. And we ended up rewriting all of their creative to make it more palatable and interesting. White label all their creative for their app. It was multi-phased. It made us a lot of money. I was pretty proud of that partnership. But on another note, when I was at CTV Toronto, I got to work on a lot of things that were more well-meaning. I worked on Sick Kids Lottery. I did a lot of stuff with the news and Tom Brown. Whenever Tom Brown broadcasted live, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, and that was pretty rewarding to be part of such a big program that helped the community and helped people in need for sure back then.
Your favorite movie?
I said best in show, I would say, because I've rewatched it several times. I love dogs. I lost my dog earlier this year, but it's quirky and it's funny. There's a lot of great Canadians in it. It's just mindless yet entertaining uh, content.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
I always say Nev Campbell because I would like somebody super cute and beautiful to play me, of course, and, why not elevate in that sort of circumstance, and she's Canadian. But when I think of somebody, she's not, I don't think, as quirky as I am, so then another beautiful, more quirky person, maybe Courtney Cox would be fun.
All right. So if Hollywood were to make this movie based on your life story, what would you call it?
Um I always say when I go to present to agencies, this is not Toastmasters. So I think that would be a great name for my movie because I present for a living, but I am probably sometimes to the leaders I've worked for, one of the more casual presenters you've ever seen when I go out. I like to say that it's part of, as long as you know your stuff, maybe hopefully you can get away with it. I'd like to hope it makes me endearing, but yeah, I'm definitely not Toastmasters when I present.
I've been in your presentations. You're great.
Thank
Look,
you.
well, look, success in sales is quantifiable. So if you're hitting your numbers, clearly you're presenting well. Just keep
Yeah.
pointing back to that spreadsheet you referenced earlier.
Okay.
Uh, your favorite book?
The high five habit. It's everybody's talking about let them with the whole Mel Robbins craze, but the high five habit was an earlier edition, and I consume more snippets of content, and it's actually allowed me some to develop some better habits.
Your favorite song?
Um, again going with CanCon. Side of the Road by Blue Rodeo, kind of, the less popular ones. Yeah, there's a couple of Blue Rodeo songs that I like. I've always been a big fan. When I was in university, I followed them from town to town for a while.
Oh, I had no idea you were a groupie.
A little bit.
All right. The best advice you have ever received?
Um, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. When I was getting ready to leave Palmerex, I was kind of nervous about going to NABS because it was a really kind of different role. It was a very independent role. Um, I joke around with my friends, family, and call in like work friends that I don't care for my own company. So being on a bigger team is always something I've gravitated to. And then the VP at Palmerex said that to me. She said, "Tammy Coughlin said, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing." And I think that's kind of, I know it's a fairly common phrase, but it's definitely stuck with me.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
Um, Always be kind to everyone. Always make time for people that reach out to you. Uh, don't neglect your network. Everything is always about your network. I tell my boys that all the time as they're kind of growing and getting closer to going out in the world themselves. Um, people, you'd be surprised at the people that will make time for you. So make sure that you reciprocate that as you move along in life.
My signature closing question: if you weren't in media, what would you be doing and why?
Um, I joke that I said I'd be working in government so I could have security and a big pension, but then I also see in that area, um, you know, politics. I used to think that I was always kind of interested in law, but to be a litigator because I like to talk, not the kind that thinks of important things and pushes paper.
And we're going to
Yeah,
end
that
things
kind.
perfect. And this has been fantastic. We're going to end things right here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. That was great. Appreciate it.